Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Lear webinar today, PeopleSoft Expenses, New Features and Functionality for Expense Excellence. My name is Jordan Fuger-Burmeister. I'm our Marketing Manager at Lear, and I'll be moderating today's session. A couple quick reminders before I pass it over to Devin. All attendees have been placed on mute today, so if you do have any questions, feel free to submit them in the chat to panelist functionality or in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. We will leave about 5 minutes for questions at the end of the presentation. A recording of today's presentation will be available on our Lear YouTube channel, as well as on our Lear Industry Insights blog, which is available on our brand new Lear website. So definitely check it out. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Devin.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Devin Tobin with Lear. I'm a solution architect here. Today, what we're going to do is hopefully we're going to go through and show you the new and improved Oracle PeopleSoft expense module. We're going to go through a couple different things prior to the expense report, which is obviously one of the most important things, but it'll answer a lot of questions probably before. So what we're going to do first is go through a couple slides here, and then we're going to jump right into the product so you guys can see. We're going to go through the travel and expense topics, which are basically going to be your cash advance, your travel authorizations, workflow notifications, and obviously the expense reports themselves. All right. And obviously, Devin Tobin. A little bit about Lear. We've been here around for 16 years. And obviously, we're a trusted advisor. We're a partner with Oracle. And obviously, we're also a premium partner as well. So here's some of our area practices, and we've got cloud practice, we got PeopleSoft services, as well as we have treasury services, solution center, which are managed services, and then obviously we have our strategic advisory services. And just a little slide here, some of our clients that we've had in the past, and this will be available to you, like Jordan said, out on the YouTube channel as well, along with the recording. We're going to go through the PeopleSoft Fluid mobile expenses. So it is going to be Fluid you're going to see today. So if you're not familiar with Fluid, right now the most advanced tools out there is 859, and we're holding you can still go to the Classic if you want to. I'll show you those navigations as well for the expense, but we're actually going to do a lot of the work today and a lot of the demonstration in the Fluid, so that you can see what the mobile would look like as well. So PeopleSoft, the Fluid mobile expenses, cash advances, travel authorization expense reports. We're going to talk about my wallet and how my wallet is populated. And then we're going to show some of the workflow as we submit either the cash advance or we submit through the travel authorizations or the expense reports. Okay, now we're just going to jump into the product here. All right, so let me. All right, guys. All right, here we go. All right, so I'm going to minimize this, put it up here. Now, I'm going to go back out. I'm going to go back to my home screen here. So for PeopleSoft, if you're not familiar with, obviously, here are what Fluid is going to look like. This is my splash page here. This is what we're calling the employee self-service. Just basically tiles that we can create. A lot of Oracle delivers most of these tiles for you, but you can create new ones, and you can put what the navigations are behind the tiles, so on and so forth. So it's a really cool look and feel. Now, I will tell you that for mobile, if you log in through your mobile device, whether it be an iPhone, an Android, iPad, whatever the case may be, when you go to expenses, you're going to see just what you see here. It formats the phones in the iPads directly onto the size of the device, so you won't have to scroll over a little bit to be able to see this, or scroll down a little bit. Everything formats it automatically fits to the window. Okay, so everything you see here, you'd be able to, when you pull up your handheld device, you'd be able to click on the tile like expenses, just like you're pressing, just like an icon. And we're going to take a look real quick. And then these are the ones that you have up there. So expenses themselves, you can create an expense report. You can add a quick expense. We'll go through these in a sec. And my wallet, and then you can look at your past expense reports. Okay, and then if you ever want to come back out to to the home page, you can come back out here. So the first thing we're going to do today is we're going to create a cash advance. So not every company allows users to create cash advances. A couple of clients that I've been on in the past, they do have that. They have a contract worked out with the bank that the users can apply for bank cards, and they can go to ATMs and create cash advances to there, and then we import them into PeopleSoft, and then they are applied against any of the expense reports they have going forward. Now, if you don't use all of your cash advance, or if you don't apply it all toward your expense report, then there's a way to reconcile it back, and it creates AR, and then you actually can pay the company back for the money that you did not apply to the cash or to the expense report. Okay, so we're going to do a quick. Now, the only thing on the cash advance, I'll say, cash advance is not available via mobile. Now, it's available to apply to your expense report, but it's not available to create a cash advance on mobile. Oracle's working on that, and I'm sure. So we're going to navigate to it. We're going to go to the employee self-service, and we're going to do a quick cash advance. So you see all the entries we have here. I'll go through some of these, but we have a limited amount of time, so I'm going to let you see kind of the big things that we have that are available here on the cash advance side. We're going to create and modify. So I'm going to go out and just create a quick cash advance. Now, the good thing about on your employee self-service, it automatically pops in your employee ID. And why is that important? Well, if you don't necessarily know your employee ID, the client I'm at right now doesn't know, they don't necessarily know their employee ID, they know their Opera ID, but they don't know their employee ID. So what this does, your Opera ID is linked to your employee ID, it pulls in your employee ID automatically for you. So you don't actually have to put that in. So we're going to add one here. And we're just going to say this is webinar. Okay. Now, you can import cash advances here. You can make attachments if you want to, and you can look at some of your user defaults. Now, I'm not going to go into the user defaults much, but basically what your user defaults are, everything that for your Opera ID or for your employee ID, these are all going to be your defaults that you have here. So you might have a credit card, you might have your corporate card information, your bank account. Now, obviously, bank accounts, corporate card, or credit cards are all personal and protected information. So you're going to see most of the time they're going to be masked with with the last 4 digits only showing. Same thing with the bank accounts; they'll be masked as well as we set those up. And then you'll have your default information as your employee, your organizational data here. You're going to have your business unit that you're defaulted to. And most of the time, this is going to be what you are in your payroll system. Okay, what department am I in? So you're going to have a default department that comes in, and you're going to also have a default GL business unit as well. And the last thing I wanted to point out here, which is going to become important, is going to be your supervisor. This is going to be your immediate supervisor, that whether it's in your HR system or you have a hierarchy in the financial system, but you will have a supervisor there. Now, if your supervisor, let's say, goes out of town, you'll be able to delegate a new supervisor in the interim, so for any type of approvals, things like that. Okay, so let's go back out to the cash advance real quick. And we'll go to the, let's see. All right. So I'm going to create a quick one. I'm going to say this is going to be a cash advance. This is going to be for a trip. I'm going to say I need $700. Okay. And once I do that, now PeopleSoft has added, Oracle has added now the ability to add your accounting details in here. Before, what it was, it would default from your profile, and you would have your business unit, you would have your department, and the account was feeding off of your accounting entry template. Everybody knows the accounting entry template. If you use PeopleSoft, their AP uses it, AR uses it. Basically, every other module uses it. It's basically your offset template for all your offset accounts. So it was creating this from there. So they've added the ability to key this in directly. Now, you don't have to. This can be hidden, but it can be hidden via functionally. You don't have to have a customization to do that. So if you want to use the default information in there and you don't want users to be able to type that in, we can hide this. We can hide it. We can gray it out. Whatever the case is, it allows you. It's a function that allows you to do that. Okay. So $700. I'm saying, okay, hey, I need to have approval on this before I can actually take this money or get this money. So before it's paid to me. So I'm going to check this box. I'm going to submit for the cash advance. And I'm going to go ahead and submit that. Okay, so now that it's been submitted, I have to wait for it to be approved before I can get this paid to me. Okay, so let me look at where it is on the approval process. Okay, so now, so I'm an employee. It's been submitted, and now it's going to go to my supervisor here, ready for approval. Okay, so at any point in time, if I want to know the status of my cash advance or my travel authorization or my expense report, I can go back out to the actual a cash advance, which is 19, or I can go to my travel authorization, and I can see every time somebody updates this, they'll have a little green check mark there. So if it's right now, it's in William Scott's queue, and once he approves, it's going to get a green check mark in it, and then here you can see where it says pooled. What that means is there could be more than one expense manager that can approve your cash advance. And so it'll go into everybody's queue. Now, at any point in time, if one person sees it and approves it, unless you have it marked to say everybody has to approve, if one person in the pool approves it, then it can move on and it can go for payment, which is over an 8. Okay. So easy enough. Cash advances are very simple. You need money upfront, maybe to pay for a trip. You get it. You can create workflow for it. Now, keep in mind, the workflow on this can be different than the workflow on your expense report, can be different than the travel. All three of those can have different routing. So if for a cash advance, if you wanted to route one way, you can do that. Travel authorizations, you can route a different way. Expense reports, you can route a different way. You can have many stops. You don't have to limit yourself to just 2 stops. You can limit it to, you can do 1 stop, you can do multiple stops. It's going to be whatever your requirements are based on your business. Okay. Now, this button right here allows you to withdraw this. So we'll say you make a mistake. Now, as long as this person has not approved it yet, you can withdraw it. Now, if this person has approved it, you can call this person and say, hey, can you push this back to me because I made a mistake? And at that point, this person or William Scott can say, okay, yeah, I can push it back. And once he pushes it back, then it's going to come back to pending status. Okay. So you automatically, every time you look at the screen, you should know exactly where or what status your cash advance is in. All right. All right. We'll have questions on this at the end, but just want to give you an idea of how easy it is to create a cash advance. Now we're going to do a travel authorization. I've already created a couple in advance just so we didn't waste time keying values in, but I want to go into the travel authorization. And I have submitted one out there. Actually, it's been approved, sorry. Okay, so I'm going to look at this one. So I'm going to say I needed to take a trip. Well, my company policy says I have to have approval prior to booking travel. So for instance, if I'm going on a sales call, if I'm going out on recruiting, or just whatever the case may be, I need to have, at least an idea of what I'm going to be spending out there. And your business requirements say you need to have this. Okay. Keep in mind, a travel authorization cannot be backdated, delivered. Now, we've had clients that said, well, we let them create it. It's an audit requirement that they have to have a travel authorization, but they don't create it until after they take the trip. Well, you can't do that. So in Oracle Delivered, it says, hey, you've got to create a travel authorization for a future trip. So you can't backdate this and say, well, today's the 16th. I want to backdate this to 11/11 because it's going to say, well, you have to have, this is a travel authorization for going forward. So just keep that in mind. It's not required to have for an expense report. Either is a cash advance. These are all independent, different things that you can. Now, you can apply this to the expense report. And that's what we're going to show in a second. So this has been approved for $1,000. Now, does that mean I'm limited to $2,000? No, I'm not limited to $1,000. I have the ability to, when I attach this, if I have some incidentals, if I have parking, or if I have, some room tax or whatever the case may be that I didn't put here, then I can add that to the expense report after the fact and still has to go through approval. Okay. So the easy thing here is we can create one, but I just want to show this is the one I'm going to apply to my expense report because I'm going to create a travel out there, because I'm going from Atlanta to Atlanta. I'm just going out into the city, and I'm going to do a sales call, and I've got $1,000 out here that I anticipate expending. Okay, easy enough. So if you need to put attachments here for any type of backup on this. So hey, I was going to make a hotel reservation, and I looked up the value of the ticket on there. I can actually put the attachments in here, and also too I can put the accounting on here. So the expense types on here, and you'll notice everything has an expense type out there. Okay, so if you look at the expense types here, air travel, hotel lodging, entertainment meals, these are going to be a finite list that you have for your company. Your company's going to say, here's how we track our spending, down to the, whether it be the granular level to a summary level, whatever the case may be. And these are going to drive your accounting. So you also notice here your bill type. If you notice that air travel, if I'm going to go out and if I'm going to bill this to a client, then my accounting might be a certain way. So for instance, my air travel, I might book it to a different account and maybe a different operating unit if I do that, if it's going to be billed back to the client. If it's an internal cost, hey, it's a sales call, we're going to be, eating the cost, then you might want to book it to a different account. So your billing type here, and you can have multiple billing types. You can have as many as you want to have the drive, the different types of accounting that you want for each of these expense types. Okay. So that doesn't mean you're just, when I have a default out there for an account on this right here, that it always has to go there. No, it can actually go to, if I'm billing this out to, to a client or to an external or to something else, I can actually have different accounting for those. Okay. So now that this has been approved, I've already had this approved, I'm going to create an expense report. I've got one out there, and we're going to take a look at that one. So I'm going to go into my expense reports, but I'm going to create one on the fly here that you guys can see this. Actually, let's go back out to there. I'll go ahead and create one real quick. So, but we're going to work with this one after, so I can apply everything to it. So we're going to go to expenses, and we're going to create the expense report. Okay, now what does this do? It's going to create a shell out there to say, okay, hey, I'm starting a new expense report. Same thing goes with if you're on your mobile device. So we'll just say you're out in a restaurant and you have a group of people that you've taken out on a client dinner, and you want to take a picture of it with your phone, your receipt. And what you can do is you can go out, you can log into PeopleSoft, you can go and create an expense report, or you can create a My Wallet entry. And we're going to say, hey, this is for a business meal. And you know what? I was in Atlanta when I did this. So now the default location here is you don't necessarily have to use that. These are all these fields here are optional, except for obviously the accounting, but attach receipts. If you don't require receipts over a certain amount, it'll tell you that. So you can set rules for each of these. You can set rules for the receipt attachments, for the location, because obviously we all know that a lot of times when you're in a location, you're limited by, okay, here your per diem is this. If you're GSA, if you're government, you have GSA rates, you have CONUS and no CONUS, whether it be domestic or international. And when you put the default location in there, it automatically says, okay, hey, based on the expense type, I'm going to be pulling in the amounts per diem. Now, you don't necessarily have to go with the per diem rates. You can just say, hey, you're just going to go with actuals, and it allows you to do that as well. All this is very flexible. You can do per diems, you can do GSA rates, you can do actuals all at one time or all in the same expense report. It's very flexible. All right. Now, next thing is we're going to either add expense lines, we're going to add expenses from My Wallet. And that means that you've created expense reports in the past or expenses in the past, you just haven't applied them to an expense report yet. Or you know what, I'm going to add it from a quick fill here. So I'm going to add this from a quick fill because you know what, I have the same expense report every single week. So on 11/16, I had, let's say I had air travel, I had, a conference meeting, and then I had entertainment meetings. Okay. Now, once it does that, I had, for these three, I went from this date to this date. So these three should pop in as expenses. All right. Now, I'm going to go ahead and update the details. So on this right here, you see over here on My Wallet, I've got three expenses out here that I need to put values in for. So we'll just say this is a business meal. Paid for it with cash. There's all these different things. So if you want to pay, we'll say with your credit card, when you pull in, we'll say your credit card, another field is going to open up and say, hey, this is you're pulling your credit card from your profile that you have. You also can enter one in, but you probably want to have it on your profile to be able to default in there. I'm going to say it's for cash because we don't have, I don't have a credit card attached to me here. So we're going to say it's $400. Okay. Well, $400 for a business deal, that's, we need to have some sort of idea who was at this business deal. Okay. It's going to be internal because it was a sales call. We'll say I have attachment is required. So at this point, let me back up here. You're going to see, so when I add the attachment, we'll say you're on your mobile device. It's going to look the same thing. It's going to say add attachment. It's going to say choose from my mobile device. And you see the little mobile phone here. It's going to go to your photos that you've taken a picture of. And it's going to grab, either a picture of your receipt that you put in there. So here, I'm going to pull the agenda in here, upload it, and done. Okay. So at this point, I've got a receipt. Now I want to list the attendees in this. Okay. So obviously I have myself out there because I'm creating the expense report. Now I'm going to put, Tobin Devin, and I'm with Lear. And so it was just us two that went out. Okay. So now I've put that out there, hit done. And the accounting on that, obviously, remember, based on the bill type, it's based on the expense type. And we'll just say, I wanted to split the receipt. So we'll just say the receipt is, partly, it was partly tax or partly gratuity. So we'll just say I have something else here. I could just put tax. I'm just going to put tax in here just for the sake of this. And we'll say it was gratuity, but we're just going to call it tax right now. So we'll just say that it was $375. And this is going to be $25. Okay. Now, another thing you have here. So you look up here, you see that now the remaining here is zero. Everything's been accounted for on your lines right here. Now, we'll just say some of it was you bought some, you bought a drink or you bought something on the way out and it's not going to be expensed. You can say this is going to be a personal expense. You slide that over and that won't be part of the reimbursable. So we'll just say I have one more out there and I say it was not a personal expense. And one more time, let's say it's a meal. We'll just call it, and I'm going to say it was $10. And I'm going to say that right there. So that right there is going to show up now, even though I have remaining zero. I'm going to come back over here. Once I get to the reimbursable amounts, it's going to exclude that as because it's a personal expense. Okay. All right. Now on this one, we're just going to actually, we're going to let's see the membership fees. So everything when something goes and you have an error there, it's going to highlight it. I'm going to take these out so I can submit this and you can see it. So these are I ended up not having these expenses, so I'm going to take this out. So right now my reimbursement here is going to be $400. Okay, that's the amount of the expense report. Right? I'm going to save that. You would submit. Now, see where it has, I have a travel authorization out there that need it, but I'm not going to apply it to this one, but we'll talk about that. So once you go to submit your expense report, it's going to ask you, hey, do you have something else that needs to be applied to this? Well, I have a cash advance sitting out there under my employee ID for $522. Do I want to apply it to this? Well, no, because it's actually for another trip that I'm going to be taking. So I'm not going to apply it to this. Well, you'll notice here, the $400 that I had for the expenses and the non-reimbursable of the $10 I said for we'll say the fees, I'm now due back $390. Okay. So easy enough. It accounts for everything that you want to do, especially on when you're saying, hey, expenses, receipts. Now we'll say, for instance, you don't have a receipt, you do have to put in a comment. So if your company requires you to put in a receipt and say, hey, I don't have a receipt, or I lost it, and we all know that we lose receipts, then what'll happen is you'll have to put in a comment and say, oh, I lost receipt. I can maybe show my charge on my credit card. Okay. So now we're going to submit this. There's a little attestation here that says, hey, I tested all the expenses for everything in here that I incurred here complies with the expense policy. And that can be customized. Okay. So I have out there. So if you look at my expense reports, now I've just submitted this. So I've waiting approval here is where I just went. So you'll see that I just looked at this business bill. It's out there sitting in for approval. I have some out there that are pending payment that I've already sent over into AP. They just haven't been paid yet. Or if I want to view all, so it kind of categorizes everything. So you kind of know where all your expense reports are. You say, oh, this is still awaiting approval here. So let me click onto that. And you see out there that it's been pulled. I can look to see who's the approver here. And I've got approvers out here. Now you can always set to say, no self-approval, things like that. I didn't set that. I just want to show you that you can have the ability to do that. But you have an expense report out. So up to this point, now we're going to go back and I'm going to show you how to apply the cash advance. We're going to send it over into AP. So what we've done so far is we've created a cash advance and we've created a travel authorization. And now we've created an expense report. But now I want to show you one I've created in the past for this webinar. And then I'm going to apply the cash advance to it. You can see how the cash advance will, when it goes over to AP, how much the report's you're going to get reimbursed. It's not going to be the full amount. It should be whatever the amount of the expense report is because you've already received the cash advance. It's going to deduct that on the AP side. Okay. So let's go back over to my expense reports. Back here. And we're going to look at this one right here. Okay. So I already sent this off for approval earlier. And my manager, I told him to send it back to me because I needed to update the attendees. The good thing about this is it allows you to send it off. And so when that person sent it back to me, they require a comment in there and it highlights it in a different color so that you can see that it actually is, it reflects, hey, this is why I sent it back. Okay. I needed to update the attendees of the business deal. Okay. So this one right here, I'm going to look at the cash advance and I'm going to apply $300 of it. So I'm not going to apply all of it. I'm going to apply 300. Okay. Okay. So now that I've applied to 300, it went from 1127 minus the 300 to 827. Now I'm going to update the details. I'm going to add one more attendee. Here. These. Okay. Done. Save. Now, if there's any errors, you're going to see a red flag pop up on any of these. So if you're going through, you'll see it looks like a bright red flag. So it'll point out any of these that are in error, whether it be missing receipt, they're not coded correctly, that doesn't pass combination edits, whatever the case may be. But you'll be able to see those. Now we're going to hit review and submit. Okay, and we're going to submit. Now, it never loses the history here. So what you can see is, we can go back to it in a second, 181. All right. Okay, so I submitted it before on 11/16 at say 4 a.m. Then I went back, it was sent back for revision. I resubmitted it. Now it's pending approval. And I can look to see who is actually going to go out there. So I can log in as this person to pick it up. So Savette, I'm going to log in as that person real quick, and then we're going to take a look at that. So get back out of here. All right, log out. Log in as Savette. Okay, now this is the good thing here, the cool thing I want to show you. So we're going to go to the approvals. And I see a webinar expense out there for 1127 that we just that. Now, the whole expense report, keep in mind, now, even though I've applied, it says the total due employee here. For accounting purposes, you want, or audit purposes, you really want the expense report to match the receipt. So even though you're applying this, we'll get to this in a second. We're going to have a drill back to that $300 in a second once we send this over to AP. But this person says, okay, yeah, you know what? I look at all these. I am going to select them all, and I'm going to approve them. Okay, easy enough. Now, hold on. I'm going to show you one thing. So the other person says, hey, okay, I want to drill into the entertainment deals here because I told them to update the attendees. And now I can go over to the attendees as the approver and say, okay, yeah, Jack was there. I know that now. So now I'm going to X out of there. I'm going to go back to the main field, and now I'm going to approve it. Okay. So now I approve. Now you hear that in the background. That's my notifications. So I have I have turned on notifications for this. So anytime something's approved, or if it's sent back, or if something's meeting my requirements, I get an email notification. Now, can we actually look at that from there? Yes, you can. I want to take you there real quick. So if you see this, expense report has been submitted that requires your action. I can take a look at that. You can see, you can say, here's the employee ID that's sent it, their name, the number, how much is going, how much is going to be reimbursed. And then you actually can click in here and it actually goes back to there. So here we go. And actually, it should take me back to the expense report. Well, it was, sorry. Okay. Maybe it doesn't want to, but anyway, it will. So it basically, with my credentials, okay, there we go. So it took me back to the expense report itself, and I can look at it, and then I can make the approval. Now, even though I've already approved it, I can drill down through Outlook, I can drill down through whatever mail system you have, as long as the link is active, and we can make the approval via the email link. So if you've got a phone, if you've got a mobile device, you can go into your email, you can look at it through there, it can launch back into PeopleSoft, and you can make the approval. Okay. Now, next thing we're going to look at is we're going to look at how we push this over in AP. I did talk about one thing. I know we're going to run short on time, but what I wanted to go over is I wanted to show you how this pulls into your accounts payable. You can push expenses over into HR payroll. You can do that. It has the ability, has like a messaging through integration broker to be able to push it there. I always recommend doing it because in expenses, you don't set the employees up as vendors or suppliers. They come over, they're kind of quote suppliers, but they're not. They're employees, they pull in, and when a voucher is created, the voucher is the actual expense report ID, and it'll say, okay, this is a reimbursement for an employee, so it's not subject to your 1099, it's actually through your expense system, creates the entries for you on the expense side. AP, the only thing they do is push the money out the door. So they don't have to worry about setting up anything on their side. Everything is done on the expense side, and it integrates well all the way into AP. So let's take a look at that real quick. I'm going to show you how that works really fast. This would be a scheduled job. I would say you'd probably do this nightly. If you run expense reimbursements every week, every night, whatever the case may be, you can set this as a recurring job. Okay, so all right, I'm going to. Oh, sorry, I'm logged in with somebody else. You're gonna really like how you can see this. So let's do this. Okay. Okay. So I know you're not going to understand this, but I've selected all the business units that I want to pull in here. So I'm selecting all of them, and you can see that it's ready. It wants to create. It wants to create an expense report there. So it wants to pull in expense report and push it over into, now it's not trying to pull a cash advance in there because the cash advance has already been paid. So it already been processed way before now. And it's only wanting to pull an expense report in. So we're going to run this. And it's going to process this over in AP. So once that's finished, we're going to go over to the pay cycle, and I'm going to show you how it does the select. It pulls that in. It's a really seamless integration process. Again, this portion right here, which is kind of ugly on a screen, but this is more or less a scheduled job. You have what you're going to be doing. You're going to be posting the liabilities, updating the pay statuses. And then once this runs on a nightly basis, it just updates the accounting entries every time this thing runs. Really, it's a really cool process. Okay, so 2 seconds, done. And I'm not sure if everybody is familiar, if you're all users of PeopleSoft, but if you are, you'll know, obviously, you've got all your staging tables, your journal generation, all that still happens from the expense side. So when you have the liability, when you create, if somebody creates an expense report, and now we're going to go over to AP. Okay, now we're going to go actually out to the pay cycle manager. All right. And I think I put one in here for. Okay. So if you'll notice here, it's just like regular pay cycle here. I've created a daily one here. So my selection criteria, the only thing that has to be updated on the AP side, well, it really doesn't have to be updated. You put in the source PU here. You got to put in the source transaction. So I'm pulling in advances and I'm pulling in expense reports. So on your checks, now you can do checks, you can do EFTs, you can do wires. However you have your pay cycle set up and however you want the reimbursements to happen, you'll pull those into the pay cycle. So we're going to do that. We're going to do 11/16, which is today. And we're going to go over to pay cycle. And we're going to refresh. And we're going to create and process. And I'll show you once this finishes, I'm going to pull this in. I'm going to show you that it is available for you. Anybody knows that runs AP, they know that the pay cycle obviously is, if you don't have gateway, this processes all your checks, processes all your ACHs, whatever the case may be. All the payments for any of your expense reimbursements will go out through the pay cycle unless you want to use the HR payroll side. Okay, so we got details here. I'm gonna hit search. Okay, so you see I've got $827. Well, it knew based on that expense report that I had for 191, you can see that it's out there. So the 1127 and the negative 300 here, it nets it. So my payment is going to go out for 827. But for the accounting and for the visibility and for the, I guess, the audit trail, it needs to be able to create these two entries in here so that you can see that it's not just 827 and I sent over a 1,127 expense report. Oh, well, we applied the cash advance. It already automatically knows that because we've linked those two on the expense side. So it's a really cool feature that it allows it to be able to drill back as well. So now that we can pay this out, it's ready to go. Now, if the expense manager needs to be able to look at it, they can drill back from the voucher ID here. This is going to drill back to the expense report. Okay, and if they need to look to say who approved it, if they need to have a question about it, they can do that. And they can look at the expense details themselves. They can drill all the way back to every line on the expense report. They can also look at the authorization. So what we've covered so far, and it's getting up on time here, we've got cash advance. So the cash advances, which they're sometimes companies do not allow their employees to do cash advances, and that's totally fine. They're not required. Travel authorizations. If a company requires a travel authorization, they can apply the travel authorization to the expense report. Now, remember, travel authorizations cannot be backdated. So if you forget to create the travel authorization, your boss, it doesn't mean that you can't create the expense report. It just means you're not going to have a travel authorization attached to it because you can't backdate it. So the travel authorizations aren't necessarily required. That's more of a business policy. is you can apply these, but they're not going to keep you from creating an expense report. Okay. Then the expense report themselves, there are a number of different things. I showed you the tip of the iceberg and probably just a little bit under, but you have the ability to customize the screens and requirements so that, we'll just say for instance, on some of these that have receipts, you can say, hey, under $25, I don't want to have a receipt. So if you require a receipt, but there's certain expense types that you don't necessarily make people create receipts for, you can exclude those in the rules, in the configuration. You can tell them that for certain expense types, I want to be able to use the per diem rates. So for meals and incidentals, if I'm on location, I'm going to say, well, I want to use the location amounts. So for Atlanta, it might be $50 for meals for a day, but now for per diems, you might only get 45. So it can handle all three different scenarios on one expense report if needed. Okay. So, so Jordan, I'm going to turn it back over to you, just so maybe we can go over any questions or whatever. Open up the line for that.
Yeah, looks like we have a couple that came in here through the chat. So can you discuss the process when an expense report is created in a prior accounting period, which has since been closed while the report was being approved?
Okay, so good question. So the expense report, if it's been created in a prior period, what it'll do on your, based on your journal generator template, you can generate those entries into the new period. Now, if you can, what you can also do is you can copy that expense report into the new period, and you can take out the one that's in previous. So a lot of times what they do is you can have rules on that. If you have, hey, I need to have all these things accrued for, we'll just say you have an expense report out there. There's 30 expense reports out sitting in your system, and they have not been paid yet, and they're in the prior period. They can be accrued for automatically based on some rules that we, the configuration rules, to be able to put the accrual in the right period, and then you can push the expense report into the next period. I didn't show you that, but you can actually do that. Yep.
And it says there's two kind of around cash advances. So if you hit on it, you can just recap quick, but is there a way to change workflow for any expense report that has a cash advance? We have a request for this, that they only get expense reports that have a cash advance attached to, but it says also we do not use AP, but payroll to pay employees.
Yep. So like I mentioned, you can use payroll to do that. Not everybody uses AP. People might not have the AP module. You can actually message it through there's a delivered messaging integration broker to push it over there. You can use that. Now, to answer your question about the routing, absolutely. So one of your rules is on workflow, you can do it two different ways. So one way would be you can set the rule on the, it would be under the expense rule routing. You would route that and say, okay, if the cash advance, you have a record in there and say, it's basically like a if then clause. If there's a cash advance attached, I can route it through one path. The other way you could do it is, we'll just say you don't want to go through, having all this creation of all this workflow steps. What you can do is you can do on the fly adding people. So workflow in 9.2 AWE allows you to add people on the fly. So we'll just say I'm approving something, but I want, because it has a cash advance, it needs to go to Jimmy over here. I can add Jimmy on the fly in the routing without having to modify any rules or configuration. I can add that person and it can route to that person for the approval. So there's two different ways you can handle that.
Excellent. Thanks, Devin. And then another one just came in quick. Where can I see the approval workflow for the travel authorization?
So the travel authorization is not, right now, it's not available in the fluid side, it's on the available. So if I were to go back over to here, I can go here, travel authorization. Authorization, we'll say I want to look at the one I just did. So it was this one with webinar. So here's the workflow for the travel authorization. They're moving it into the fluid, just hasn't gotten there yet, but they are moving it there. So you'll be able to see it. There's a couple different places you can see it.
And then last question too was on the cash advances, but do you monitor cash advances that were approved but not associated to expense reports?
Yes, so there is a report out there to be able to look at outstanding cash advances. Now, there is a place in here to be able to reconcile the cash advance. So again, you might have taken a cash advance out there for $1,000. Well, if you're allowing companies to do cash advances and they over or they underspent, or let's say they took a cash advance out was more than the expense report, and it happens a lot, you're going to have a bunch of 10, 15, maybe $100 sitting out there for all these different employee IDs. So you can run a report and say, here are all the outstanding ones. Now, if you want to reconcile those, all you'll do is you go out to the reconciliation of the cash advance. Now, the cash advance at that point has to have been applied. If it's been applied to the expense report and that's what's left, you can go out there and you can create AR for the remaining balance for all of them in the cash advance. It's under the cash advance menu, but let's see, reconcile. I'll have to find it for you, but you can reconcile the cash advance here. Basically, what it does, it gives you a window here. So if you look at the advance, okay, well, I don't have any out there for reconciliation yet. But if you can, what you can do here is once you reconcile these, then it will actually create the AR for you.
Excellent. Thank you, Devin. With that, we are a couple minutes over, so we're going to go ahead and wrap today's webinar. I know we covered lots of topics, so if anyone has questions, feel free to reach out. We have a PeopleSoft@alear.com email, or you can reach out to me directly. We can get you connected with Devin. Thanks so much, Devin, for your time today. Yep. And everyone have a great rest of their afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.